Hello and welcome to this video manual for the Origin Effects BASSRIG 15. The BASSRIG 15 is an all-analogue preamp and DI pedal based on the Ampeg B-15 Portaflex amplifier. It's part of our amp recreation range, which means it contains an entire valve amp style circuit, including a simulated preamp, phase inverter, power amp, reactive load and cabinet simulator. This allows it to accurately recreate the sound and playing feel of the legendary B-15, whether you use an amp or run straight to a PA or interface. So let's get started. First, connect the power. The BASSRIG 15 requires a 9V DC power source with a 2.1mm centre negative connector. The BASSRIG 15 requires 200mA or greater. Connect your bass guitar to the instrument jack using a standard 1/4" mono instrument cable. You can also connect other pedals to the BASSRIG 15, but for the purposes of this manual, we'll be keeping it simple and plugging our bass straight into the BASSRIG. The amp out jack also accepts a standard 1/4" mono instrument cable and is intended for connecting to an amp on stage, but we'll get to that later. For now, we'll be hearing the DI out. This is a balanced XLR output and features an all-analogue cabinet simulation of the Ampeg B-15's ported 1x15 cab. This can be used to run direct to a PA system or audio interface. Now let's look at the main controls. These relate to the part of the pedal that recreates the B-15's circuitry. The main controls are output, drive, blend, bass and treble. Turning up the drive control will take you from a clean tone to an overdriven tone. This is like the volume knob on the B-15. Because the B-15 is a non-master volume amp, increasing its volume control results in natural compression and then power amp overdrive. The BASSRIG 15 circuit responds the same way. Somewhere in the range of the drive knob, you'll find the sweet spot for the vintage valve amp tone you're looking for. The output control is positioned after all the amp recreation circuitry and is simply an output level control, affecting both the DI out and the amp out. It doesn't have any effect on the tone or drive characteristics. The blend knob allows you to add some clean signal alongside your drive tone, which can help add clarity and definition when using more overdriven sounds. Fully clockwise, the signal is 100% amp recreation. As you turn this control down, clean signal is added in parallel to the amp recreation circuitry. This affects both the amp out and the DI out, and the blend comes before the amp out EQ and cab sim. The bass and treble controls work just like the controls on a real B-15, giving you independent control over bass and treble frequencies with a broad musical shape to their curves. Unlike a lot of vintage amp tone stacks, these controls can cut or boost. At 12 o'clock, these controls are completely flat, cutting or boosting as you adjust counterclockwise or clockwise. Don't be afraid to make big boosts or cuts with these controls. Their whole range is very musical and can achieve a wide variety of sounds. Because the BASSRIG 15 works like a non-master volume amp, the tone shaping of the bass and treble controls comes before the overdrive of the simulated power amp, so these controls shape the tone and the character of the overdrive. With overdriven tones, boosting the treble will also make the driven tone more aggressive and cutting. It can be a good idea to cut bass with more driven tones, as it tightens up the low end and stops the tone from becoming too mushy and indistinct. Now let's take a look at the two outputs, starting with the DI out. The DI out is a balanced XLR output that allows you to connect directly to a PA system or audio interface. If your PA mixer or interface has the option to select between mic or line level, you should select mic level. There are two switches associated with this output relating to the cab sim and grounding. First, the DI cab sim switch. This switch selects when the built-in cab sim is active. In the on position, the DI out's cab sim is always active, regardless of whether the pedal is active or bypassed. This means you get the complete B-15 sound when the pedal is on, and when it's bypassed, you can use it as a cab sim for any other preamps or drive pedals that are placed before it. In the effects position, the cab sim is only active when the pedal is active. Again, you get the full B-15 sound when the pedal is on, but a completely flat, clean DI when bypassed. This can be useful if you want to toggle between a vintage amp style tone and a more modern direct-to-desk sound in the course of your set. In the off position, the cab sim is always disabled. When the pedal is on, you still get all the tone shaping and amp-like feel from the amp recreation circuitry, but without the cab sim. This allows you to add your own choice of cabinet simulation, such as impulse responses inside of your DAW. When the pedal is bypassed, you have a clean, flat DI. With clean tones, the BASSRIG 15 can sound good without any cabinet simulation, kind of like a studio preamp that adds a little coloration and tone shaping. However, this is only suitable for clean tones, and any overdriven sounds will sound harsh and fizzy without cabinet simulation applied. The DI ground switch lifts the ground on the DI out, which can solve problems with hum caused by ground loops when connecting the BASSRIG to two pieces of equipment using both outputs. If you're using both the DI out and the amp out and you hear hum, flick this switch to lift and the hum should go away. If you're only using the DI out, make sure this switch is set to ground. If you're only using the amp out, then this switch will have no effect. Please note that the DI ground switch will only fix hum problems caused by ground loops. It won't cure hum from single coil pickups or noisy pedals placed before the BASSRIG. Now let's look at the amp out. This output is designed to be connected to an amp on stage, either as a monitor when using the DI out to feed a PA system, or as your main tone. The amp out doesn't have any cabinet simulation, as you'll be running it into an amp and cab that are already colouring the sound in their own way. A cab sim into a real cab can often sound artificially exaggerated. However, most cabs don't have the unique tone of the B-15's cab, so we've added the amp out EQ to tweak the sound going to your amp. This gets it much closer to the sound of the B-15, so the sound from your amp matches the cabinet simulated tone from the DI out. The amp out EQ is only active when the pedal is turned on and lets you make changes to your amp's tone without altering the sound from the DI out. So why is this important? The B-15's cab has a warm top end response and is quite tight in the bass frequencies, whereas modern bass cabs tend to be much more full range, extending much further into the treble and bass frequencies. One of the main reasons for this difference is that a lot of modern bass cabs have a tweeter. A lot of the time you can't turn the tweeter off in a bass cab, or you might want to leave it active for your clean tones, which is where the high cut switch comes in. This adds a steep roll-off in the upper mid-range, removing higher frequencies to give your cab the same high frequency response as a B-15 cab, and preventing any fizziness from driven sounds from reaching your tweeter. The low-cut switch does the same for the bass frequencies. By adding a precise roll-off in the bass, this filter tightens up the low end to match the B-15 cab, giving you a punchy vintage tone even if your cab is naturally deep and modern sounding. The HF and LF trimmers allow you to fine-tune the high and low frequency response by cutting and boosting high, mid and bass frequencies. For example, if you switch on the high cut control and there's still a little too much treble reaching your cab, make a small cut using the HF trimmer. Or maybe the high cut's doing a good job of removing fizz, but you want to add a little presence back into your tone. Alternatively, your cab might not have a tweeter, so you don't need the high cut switch, but you may still need to tweak the HF trimmer to get the response you want from your amp. The amp out EQ means you can do this without adjusting the BASSRIG's main controls and changing the sound from the DI out. The same principle applies to the LF trimmer. Whether you're using the low cut switch or not, the LF trimmer lets you tweak the low frequency content from the amp out to get a more authentic B15 tone from your amp. Just like the main bass and treble controls, you shouldn't be afraid to make big tweaks with the HF and LF trimmers. Bass cabs are all different, and most are very different to the B15, so tweak by ear until you find the sound you like. There are lots of great sounds lurking in the BASSRIG 15, from fat soul tones to gritty rock and roll, super clean to fuzzy overdrive. Everything the B15 can do, you can get from this pedal. To hear more of these iconic vintage tones in action, please check out our sample settings video, and you can find full details of this pedal, our other BASSRIG amp recreations, and the rest of the range at origineffects.com. Thanks for watching.